Hello, my name is Mira Piton. I am the Product Knowledge Manager at Pepperi. Thank you for joining our product education. This is the third webinar in the series where in each webinar we drill deep into a specific module, explaining the features and the benefits. Today's session is on user profiles and multilingual features. I'll start with an overview of what profiles, what multilingual features are, and the main points we'll discuss today, and then we'll go in and I'll demonstrate to you live on the system and on my iPad, as usual. User profiles allow you to segment your Pepperi functionality and the views and the layout of the forms, different roles in your organization. So as you can see, for example, if you have a buyer profile, if you have users that are using the app on their device and they are merchandisers, you can see there's a different layout. This is just one example of one screen you can configure differently for the merchandiser that's doing audits, that's able to connect to different sites of the company, to do photo activities and things like that a merchandiser specifically as a role in your organization has to do. Another example, which is of course the basic default use of the app, which is the sales rep. You can see they have a different shortcut here. They have different access buttons into the app. So defining profiles and then very, very simply configuring what should be available, which functionality, what should be exposed, what data should be exposed, which functionality should be exposed to each of those profiles. That is what the benefit of this feature is. Again, this feature is available in the ultimate package of Pepperi, although sometimes it can be combined with other packages. So at the end of this webinar, if you want to try it out, if you want to turn it on to test it, you can ask support to do it. And then if you want to continue using it, then you can, what kind of package you have in Pepperi and what's required as far as paying for the package. The next topic we'll talk about today, which is pretty much, it's related to user profiles. That's why we put it together in the same webinar, also because the two topics are not that complex. So I prefer to do one webinar on two of these smaller topics. But they are somewhat related because they're also related to the concept of different types of users. However, not in the same way that you would configure the profiles. The idea behind multilingual configuration is to be able to provide the actual texts of your custom fields in your forms and your views in the multiple languages, depending on the language that the user uses on his device. So what this means is it's depending on the language that they selected the iPad to be displayed in, or the iPhone or the Android tablet, depending on that language, you will be able to upload your own translation in any language that you need. And then the field labels, the field headings will grab those translations if the device language is selected. So the typical use case, if you have sales reps that speak different languages that are walking, going around Europe, or say in the United States, Spanish and English, or French, Canadian, and English, you have reps that are using Pepperi, and you want some of the reps to see the values here of the field heading in their language, in Spanish, say, and the rest can see it in the default language in English. You can upload a very simple CSV file that translates all of your field headings to the language displayed. This is also irrespective of the app language. Okay, Pepperi runs in 11 different languages. Okay, but if you wanted to your field headings to be shown in a language that Pepperi is not translated into. When I say Pepperi, I mean the app itself. I mean the text of the app button themselves, like cancel, back, next, order center, activity list, those hard-coded texts that are inside the app, not your specific field headings that are shown. but the actual text of the app does not run in a certain language. Let's say, for example, Norwegian. Okay, just a random language. Pepperi is not translated to Norwegian. However, if you wanted your field headings, see here I have an example of the buttons on the home screen and a form, an activity that I created with field headings, different types of field headings. Here you see in this example checkbox fields, could be text box, email field, paragraph text, photo field, any field that has a heading, which in Pepperi, you know, every field has a heading. For example, you can see here this heading, account name. That's the heading of the field, while the value of the field is the name of the account, right? I'm referring to only the headings. So you can load a CSV file that translates the heading to Norwegian. And then, irrespective of the app language, the device language could be in Norwegian as well, and if Pepperi isn't translated to Norwegian, the app will run in English, meaning the hard-coded app text will be in English, while your headings will be translated to the language of your choice. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to make the app very appealing to reps that speak many different languages, while using the same exact Pepperi account, you're just uploading a full of CSV files where you're translating those key fields that you need your users to see in their specific language. Okay, so that's an overview of the two topics we'll discuss. You can see how they're somewhat related because they both talk about different types of users in your organization. So let's just highlight the difference between the two topics because I don't want any confusion relating the two topics because they're not the same thing. They're different. User profiles segment which fields are displayed. So you can define for different profiles that you create the fields that should show in the catalog view, the different types of activities that should be available on the account dashboard. Which fields and activities are available, which are displayed on the dashboards and the forms. Well, multilingual configuration translates the headings or the titles of the fields by the device language, and that's irrespective of the app language. Okay, so that's the difference. One defines which fields are displayed, and the other, regardless of which profile you're in, which fields are displayed or not, the fields that are shown if you upload the translations in multilingual configuration, it will show those field titles in the language that you uploaded if the device language is set to that language. Okay, so let's start with user profiles. Examples of types of profiles you could have in your organization. Rep, of course, manager, merchandiser, driver, trainer. But if you have some other ideas, I'd be happy to hear what kind of roles you might have. And if you could type them into the questions tab, I could share them. Okay, so like I said, the user profile allows you to segment the Pepperi functions and the views and even the permissions by the roles in your organization. And what I'm going to show you today is how to accomplish these 5 or 6 different tasks. I'll quickly just mention them now without drilling too much detail because we will look at them on the back office and the iPad. How to configure a different home screen, account dashboard, catalog view, activity forms and lists, order details form, the PDF, the smart search settings, any setting basically that can be configured in Pepperi in the back office can be segmented by profile. You can use profiles, and don't confuse this with the multilingual, but you can actually use profiles to display different properties or custom fields with different values for languages, for example. So if I have the most popular use of this is the item description field. Sometimes people want to show an item description in a translated language. They want to show it to certain users in French and other customers in Spanish, or for the reps themselves to see the description of the items in different languages. As you know, there is no way to translate the text that you upload that's coming from your ERP to a different language. You upload one property for the one item description. It's a field in Pepperi called item description, and it's in your default language. However, using profiles, I'll show you how you can load the item descriptions as just multiple fields that are properties or custom fields, and then you can define which field should show for each type of profile. And then you would have a profile for a Spanish rep, a French rep, an Italian rep, and you would show only the field in that language for that profile. Very simple to do, and it solves the problem of translating text values of the fields. Okay, now remember this is different than the multilingual feature because remember the multilingual feature translates the field headings and not their values, right? So you can have the translation of the field heading account name into your language, whatever it is in Spanish or whatever it might be, and then, but the account name itself will always be the same. It will always be in the language that it was uploaded into as data values. However, in using user profiles, I'll show you a way to actually affect which value is shown for a certain field. Okay. You can configure which types of profiles a senior sales rep, a manager can have a write permission on certain fields. For example, giving a discount in the shopping cart. You can say certain profiles can give that discount in the cart, before submitting the order, while to other profiles that's going to stay read-only, and they will not be able to edit the order price at the time of the order. And it's very simple. I'll show you how to do that. I wanted to emphasize the fact that for those of you using the B2B storefront, the self-service ordering for your customers, whether it's on the web or on the mobile device, the buyer profile is very useful because then you obviously have different configuration for the layout of the catalog, for the shopping cart, where images are shown, what product information is shown. You may want that to be different for a buyer than it would be for a sales rep doing a face-to-face order taking. Okay? And by the way, the buyer profile is standard out of the box. That comes if you're using the storefront. It's not something you have to activate the profiles feature for. So I wanted to highlight to you that profile already exists, and it's relevant to you only if you're using the B2B. And I'll mention a feature that's coming soon that allows you to do profile-based actions in the workflow of your transaction. I don't know I think some of you attended our webinar, our last product technical webinar. Me and myself and Yana, a product manager, gave a webinar showing the new workflow designer, which is kind of like a Visio chart workflow that you can add actions to. And it's something that you have to test. It's not activated by default in your account. It's a new version of the workflows, much more flexible, a lot more different types of actions. Today you have in your workflow, sending an email, updating the inventory count, taking a payment, all of those things that happen once you hit the submit button on a shopping cart, all those actions that are triggered. In the new workflows, you have a lot more flexibility there, a lot more configurability, and you also have this option of profile-based actions. So certain users have the ability to change the status of an order from one status to another, kicking off certain actions, while other users will never even see that button available, and those actions will not get kicked off. So that's a more even complex level of segmenting the Pepperi workflow, your business workflow using profiles. I recommend to you in our help center at support.pepperi.com, you have the recorded webinar section. And there you have the training, the very good introduction there recorded of that workflow designer if you're interested in and you weren't able to make it. Okay, so let's start from the basics. This is what configuring different views and forms by profile actually looks like, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it already. You're all used to seeing every form that you configure in Pepperi, the rep form, and then we have the admin form, and then some of you who are using the storefront, the B2B self-service ordering, you have the buyer form. So what the user profile feature allows you to do is to add as many more of these forms as you wish. I have a merchandiser, for example, here, which you can see has completely different activity toolbar layout. So when my merchandiser goes into an account, he can do an audit, he can do a competition audit, a stock taking, a shelf photo. He cannot do a sales order. You cannot do a simple order or a product survey. These are things that are reserved for the sales rep, for the admin. Okay, so I have different configurations, and the question is, how do I create? Now I want to show you how do I create this profile and how do I add the form here and start the configuration. Okay, so let's go into the back office itself on my account. I'll show you how to add profiles and assign users to profiles and then configure those profile forms. So let's go to the settings. Under users, once you activate this feature, you'll see the profiles option here. Okay. You see I already have a bunch of different profiles created. It will be empty in the beginning. You'll have just the rep profile. This is the default profile. If you don't define any special configuration for other profiles, all the profiles will use just the rep as their default base. They'll be based on the rep configuration. Okay, so let's say I wanted to add a new profile. How did I get to this tree here? What I did is you can create a profile, and then when I click on it, okay, like I created a profile called Area Manager, and then underneath it, by clicking on it here and clicking plus profile, I added another profile called Senior Rep. And it's based on the Area Manager. So I don't have to say that because I already created it. So what I did is I created a new profile under Rep called Area Manager. And then that was based on the rep. And then under Area Manager, when I selected Area Manager, I created a new profile called Senior Rep. Okay? And then I have this kind of tree here. And then I also created, by selecting Rep, I added a profile called French Rep, Italian Rep, Spanish Rep. And then I added another little subtree where I created a Senior Merchandiser and then below it a Merchandiser. What is the meaning of this hierarchy? Okay, what it means is that the users that are defined as being senior reps will take the configuration from what's defined for the area manager. So when I add a senior rep profile to one of my configurations, which I'll show you how to do in a minute, and say, okay, I need my senior reps to have such and such buttons on their home screen and such activities on their toolbar. So their default will be taken from the area manager. If you don't define an explicit configuration for them, it will be taken from the area manager. If you don't define an explicit configuration for the area manager, it will be taken from the rep. It's just showing you the kind of hierarchy of where the default configuration will be taken from. Because if someone is defined as a senior rep and they log into the app and you don't have any special things configured for senior rep profiles, it will take a default from the one above it. That's all this hierarchy means. It has no other meaning other than where it takes the default, what it's based on. Okay, let's add a brand new profile completely. I'll add one called Trainer. Okay, and I'll just leave it based on rep, and you'll see that it's added here underneath the rep. It's not part of any subtree. Okay, so Trainer, Spanish rep, Italian rep, French rep, and then I have Area Manager and Senior Merchandiser. And these will serve as defaults for anything that's created below them. Okay, once I created the profile, I'm now completely free to go into any configuration that I have in Pepperi. Let's go back to the one I showed you in the example. I'm going to go to the account dashboard layout, and I was in the activities toolbar where I showed you that I had multiple profiles here defined. And each one has its own configuration for the activities toolbar. Okay, just to remind you what the activities toolbar is, I'm going to put my iPad up again. Okay, and I'm going to go to the accounts list and choose any one of the accounts and go to the account dashboard. This is the activities toolbar. Okay, I'm now logged in as a merchandiser profile. My toolbar here includes activities, tasks that I can execute that are related to merchandising. the retail audit, the competition audit, the photo, the task, the visit summary. Remember, these were the ones I set up for my merchandiser. So how did I add this merchandiser profile here? The menu over here has Add Profile option. Here I selected Senior Merchandiser. Okay, it's no longer on the list because I already selected it, but I can add, let's say, Trainer. I'll add a configuration option for Trainer. And the Trainer is going to take his default from the rep. So you see here the Trainer was added, and their default is copied exactly from the sales rep. Because remember, in the tree, they were underneath the sales rep. So that's where I took just the default values. Now, obviously, I don't want my Trainer with the same values as my rep, but at least I have some base to start with, and then I can edit it and say, okay, they can do everything except for the sales orders. Okay? And maybe they have some of their own activities, like a special training activity or something that I created for them, so I'll add it to their layout. And once I save that, any one of my users that's defined as a trainer, when they log in, their activity toolbar will have the settings just for trainer. Okay, now how do you define a user to be a trainer or a merchandiser or a rep or any other profile? Very simply, in the users, when you go to manage users, you edit any one of your users. For example, here, this user Karen, and you have the profile here. All the profiles you created will be listed here, and you associate them with a profile. So when Karen logs in, she'll always see what was defined for the senior merchandiser. That's her configuration of Pepperi is the senior merchandiser configuration. That's her profile. I have another user called Spanish rep, Maria. When Maria logs in, she will see what I configured for the Spanish rep. Okay? And I'll show you an example of what Maria can see when I talked about using the user profile to show the translation of different fields. Okay, so here's the activity toolbar that I configured per profile. Right now I'm a merchandiser. I want to show you when I log out or switch users to a regular sales rep user. Okay, over here in the settings, as you probably know, you can add different users to be connected as, and you can test the view. You know, it's kind of like viewing the app as different users. So Karen was the merchandiser. Now I'm switching to Dana, who is the sales rep. You'll see that my home screen will change, and my activities toolbar will also change. See, my home screen is now the sales rep configuration, and just to refresh your memory, if you remember, you probably all know already, under company profile is where you configure the home screen. And you can see here I have a different home screen for the rep, a different home screen for the merchandiser, and different home screen, obviously, for the buyer. The buyer doesn't have access to anything except their own orders and their own history of orders, their own order-taking capability and their own history. So that's the 3 different home screens that I have. Right now I'm in the rep. If I had logged in as a trainer, which home screen would I see? I would see, of course, the rep, because the trainer takes all of his defaults from the rep, and I didn't define any profile here for trainer. So it's not going to show an empty home screen. It's just going to take the default from the profile that it is based on. It may not be relevant, it may be relevant, but if you forgot to configure, if you forgot to come here and say, hey, I want to add a profile for a trainer, if you didn't do this, then it's just going to take the default rep. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Right now I'm in the rep home screen. I'm going to go to my account dashboard, so I'll go into any one of the accounts. And you'll see that it's different. It has sales orders. It has competition audit, sales order 2. It may have similar things to what the merchandiser has, but it's not going to be identical because I defined an explicit definition of what the activity toolbar should be for the sales rep. Okay, so I showed you how to add profiles, how to assign users to profiles, how to configure different types of layouts per profile. I can show you a couple of more different layouts. For example, in the sales activities area under transaction types, for each one of your transactions, many of you may be using only 1 or 2 transaction types, such as sales order or return. But if I configure here the transaction type and go to, say, the order center views. Okay, so if I want some of my users to have different information in each one of the views of the catalog of the order center, right, when I'm placing a sales order here. So I can configure the view of the catalog, and I can, say, configure different grid line view, different thumbnail view, depending on the profile that I'm logged in as. Okay, I may want to show some information to some users, or maybe more senior users. Maybe I want to show wholesale price to some users and not to others. So it's up to you, and it's also so simple to do it. Just go into the view that you want to customize, let's say the grid line view, and say, okay, I want to make a different grid line view for my my regular sales rep. I actually have one defined here for Spanish, but I'll explain to you why later. That's a different feature. Say for my senior reps, I want to show them some more information. I want to show them wholesale price, for example. So I can go into senior rep, and I can, here I just added that layout. It's based on the rep, so it takes the default exactly from the rep. And now I just edit it and add the prices, whatever I want to differentiate to show in that grid line view. And then when I log in as a senior rep, the view will be different based on the profile. So that's another example of what you can configure, but actually any one of the configurations, whether it's a sales activity list. You may want to make some of your activity lists available for some profiles and not available for others. Again, just same thing. Okay, say my merchandiser has to see their activity list about their retail audits and their visits and their photos, but my reps, they need to see their sales transactions, right? You can, and my admin will see everything. Here, I'm talking about the activity list here, that the rep can see all of their history, right? So the rep right now has their sales transactions, their activities, their visits. When I switch user to a merchandiser profile, then I'll be able to see different lists of history here, right? These icons will change because of the configuration that I made here in the activity list display. Okay, so actually I could go into every single one of the settings here and show you how you have the multiple profiles, but there's really not much sense in doing that. It's very intuitive. Okay, so now let's continue. I'll show you the example of how to display properties and any custom fields in multiple languages per profile. So if you wanted to show actually the value of one of your fields, let's say the description of an item, like I said, which is a very popular request, you would have to, first of all, create profiles for each language. So you'd have a Spanish rep, a French rep. You saw I had Spanish rep, and I was using it in a few of the configurations. And then you would have to load properties or custom fields with the values per language. For example, the item description. Okay. Let me show you how it looks first on my iPad. I'm going to switch user to the Spanish rep, and then I'll show you how it's configured. So here I have a Spanish rep, Maria. And what I did is I loaded multiple values for the item description, and one of those values is in Spanish. So, and I added that value to the grid view. So let's go. I didn't translate every single item description, but I do have here. So here I translated just the headings of the grid view. I changed it to Spanish for the Spanish rep only. I changed it to Spanish, and then because I positioned here the property that's the Spanish translation of my item description. Okay, so this is the actual value of that property being displayed. So let me show you what exactly this means in the data-wise, and in the configuration. You know that in Pepperi you have user-defined properties. You have 8 user-defined properties you can map for each item. Okay, so we have, of course, the out-of-the-box field, like the item code, description, price, retail price, wholesale price, many different types of flags on the item, Boolean fields, and all those are built-in Pepperi fields in our database. But you have 8 property fields that are just called property 1, 2, 3, 4, up until 8, that are user-defined. You can put any information you want there. If 8 is not enough for you, or say you're already using the 8 properties for something else, because those properties are useful for creating filters. Those filters in your catalog are based on properties, or the smart search that the rep can do his own searching in the catalog based on these properties. If you use them all already, create custom fields, right? They're called PSAs. Those of you who are familiar with the custom fields. You can have unlimited amounts of custom fields. So rather than just having the one item description out of the box, the hard-coded Pepperi field, I added 3 of my own properties, or if you ran out of properties, custom fields, Spanish, French, and Italian. I'll show you quickly what it looks like in my Excel file. Very simple in the data. Excuse me. This is the out-of-the-box Pepperi item description field. And I just added my own translation of this description. I didn't translate all of the descriptions. I did the ones you saw in the catalog. And I translated them to the 3 languages. And then what I did is I went to the configuration of the grid view I showed you before. I went to my sales order transaction. And what I want to do is show my Spanish rep users, Pepperi users. Here I added the profile Spanish rep. And instead of using the typical, you see the description column that you saw before, it's property 2. Property 2, I mapped the data, property 2, I mapped the Spanish translation of the item description to property 2, which is under the item field, you have all the properties here, properties 1 through 8. Okay? I used property 9 as a secondary category, you can ignore that. But see, I used property 2 for the Spanish, right? You saw here, I mapped property 1 French, property 2 Spanish, and property 3 Italian. I could have gone all the way up until property 8. When I run out of languages, I could have added custom fields. Regardless, I added the property 2, and then instead of calling it property 2, obviously I wrote the header of the column as the Spanish translation of description. I also translated, if I'm already here, just to make it look nicer, I translated the other fields to Spanish, the other field titles to Spanish, and this will be effective just for that Spanish rep. And this is irrespective of the device language. If they change their iPad to English or their iPad to French, they will still, because I've hard-coded here the title of the column, they'll always see this in Spanish. Okay? So here you have the Spanish property 2 is being displayed here. It's not the standard item description. Now, if I log in as a regular rep, I'll switch now back to Dana, who's just the regular sales rep profile. You'll see that Spanish will not exist there. It will just be the default item description field, as is defined over here. The item name. Here, the item name, that's what's defined for the regular rep. That's, right now I switched the user to Dana, and I'll look in the catalog and see. The item name. Okay, so there's no translation because I'm a different profile. I logged in as a different user. Another aspect that you can segment based on user profile is permissions. As you know, on the shopping cart, when you display the unit discount or if you display the unit price after discount, you can mark them read-only or you can leave them open. The difference is that the rep will be able to make changes. For example, here, if we go to the shopping cart, some items here. Okay, now if I go to the shopping cart, you see, I am logged in as a profile that I actually have permission to go and edit this field. I can give a unit discount. Sorry, I can give a unit discount to my discretion. Here I gave a 10% discount because this field was not marked as read-only for my profile. Okay, I can also, this field was also left open. I can actually give an actual dollar discount. Okay, so you can change the permissions of these fields based on profiles. Very simple to do. I'll show it in just 30 seconds. It's under the transaction type that you want to control this editing of the price for. You go to the shopping cart configuration. And in the shopping cart configuration, in the grid view, you need to edit the read-only or not read-only of the field. Now, as a sales rep, I have left that field open. If we look here at unit discount and unit price after discount, it's not marked as read-only. And I was just now logged in as a sales rep, which means I can change those values. If I add a profile now, let's say, or you know what I could do, which makes more sense, is to block that capability for the sales rep and allow it only for the senior rep. So if I block the unit discount and unit price after discount, I mark them as read-only, and then I add a profile for senior rep, I add a configuration for the senior rep, which is based on the rep. Okay, so it has all the same values as the rep, then I would just go and edit, and for the senior rep, I would remove the read-only. Okay? Okay, so I'm syncing my iPad now, and then when I place, next time I place an order, I'll have that, that option blocked. Okay, so that's the idea behind those permissions. Let's just see in action. Okay, see, it's no longer editable. And that's because I'm logged in as the rep profile. If I log out and log in as a senior rep, it will be open again. Okay, let's continue to the next example. Okay, this is just a small emphasis on the benefit of configuring the buyer profile. Like I said, the buyer profile comes standard out of the box when you're using the storefront. So you can always configure the buyer differently than the sales rep, even if you don't have the user profile feature enabled. You can always configure the home screen of the buyer, the catalog views, you know, just like I showed you, the grid line view, the thumbnail view, the shopping cart, the order details form, the PDF form. All of those are explicitly configurable for the buyer, and you should take advantage of that to customize the buyer experience and expose the relevant data to the buyer profile. Okay, and last thing I'll say before we move on to the multilingual configurations, in the new workflow designer that we released, another feature that will be coming soon is the ability to break up the workflow by profile, to say, okay, I want to have certain actions. An action in the workflow takes an activity, or it takes transaction from one status to another, and it kicks off a certain action like a transition. The transition of statuses kicks off a list of actions. Now, you may not want certain users to be able to kick off those actions. You may not want the submit button to say submit. You may want it to say send for approval, or check order, or send. It just kicks off an action to send an email to the senior rep that the regular sales rep wants to make some kind of discount on the order, and he can't submit it until the senior rep will approve it. So those kind of workflows are possible in the new workflow designer. And in the view of once you configure the new workflows and all the actions for each status transition, you can define which of those transitions should be available per profile. Just the same configuration just as it was for the forms and the views and the account dashboard. Just this time it's for actions that take place in the workflow. So maybe you don't want certain emails to be sent, or you don't want the inventory count to change, or you don't want, or you want the manager to be notified instead of someone else, or any kind of action that you configured in the workflow can then be segmented by the profile. You can see here in this example, I have the rep is allowed to submit an order to kick off actions that when there's a new order before it's submitted, as soon as the order is created in the new workflows, you can kick off actions. You can, when an activity is planned for a sales rep and he completes it, so there are actions that are kicked off, like emailing the manager telling him, you planned this activity, this sales rep executed this activity, it has been completed. The merchandiser also has activities that are planned for them, so they should have that action, but they don't submit orders, so they cannot do any of these workflow-related actions. Buyers can only submit an order and create a new order, and these are kind of workflow actions that each profile can trigger. Okay, so that's coming soon, but that's, again, only if you're using the new workflows. The new workflows are like a Visio diagram based, and I mentioned in the beginning that if you're interested in testing them, I really recommend that you go on our Help Center in the recorded webinar section and watch that the workflows training, product training that we showed a couple of weeks ago, what the workflows are used for, what their benefits are, and if you need them or not. You know, if you need to get to that level of complexity. Now let's talk about the multilingual configuration. As you can see, the multilingual configuration allows you to translate the headings of the fields in the app. Like I mentioned, and I really wanted to emphasize, this is irrespective of the language of the device, it's irrespective of the language of the Pepperi app. So it's triggered by the language that's selected on the device. If you're on an iPad and you go into the settings and you change the language to French, you'll see the French headings for the buttons. You'll see the French headings for the fields, as long as they were translated. If you switch and go and then switch the device language on your iPhone, on your Android tablet, on your iPad to Spanish, you'll see the home screen with the labels translated to Spanish. Okay, this is very different than what I showed you a bit earlier, where I hard-coded the translation of the word description. Remember, in Spanish, for the Spanish rep, that was a hard-coded translation. Any Spanish rep who logs in, no matter what language their device is in, could be someone where their iPad is in French, but they're Spanish-speaking and they are defined as a Spanish rep profile, they will see that heading in their grid line view that I showed you as description translated to Spanish because that was hard-coded in my Pepperi configuration of that catalog view. What I'm talking about here in multilingual configuration is regardless of the language of the app itself, you can upload CSV files that will translate the headings of the fields based on the language of the device. So let's see a little bit about how it works. Okay, so I already said that the reps are using devices that are set to different languages. They can see translated data headings. And this is mainly used to translate your custom fields. Custom fields many times can be very long. They're very important for, they're used on activity forms, and they need to be translated. So I'll show you how you can do that. Again, it's not limited to the language of the app. You can do it in Norwegian. You can do it in any African language, in any, in Arabic, any language that, even if Pepperi itself, the app is not translated to that language. Okay, it requires just downloading and translating a CSV file, and I'll show you how to do it now. Sorry, I'll show you how to do it now. Okay, so underneath configuration files in your settings, you have translation files. This is an area where you can define, by default it's empty. Okay, you see I have here Spanish and French CSV files that I loaded. Like I just showed you on my iPad. I translated some strings and I uploaded them. How do you upload these files and where do you get the template from? Okay, so what you need to do to add a new file or add a new language, you click here on Add and you select the language. Okay, I selected French and Spanish. You can select any language that you want to translate your field headings to. Okay, and I selected French and Spanish, and now those templates exist. However, they're not translated yet, right? Because all of your custom fields that you created in Pepperi were created in your default language. For example, let's quickly jump to look at an example of a custom field. Okay, let's look at under activity types. I have an activity called retail audit, and you see here the form of the activity consists of about 20 or 30 custom fields. Okay, let's open up the form of the senior merchandiser or any profile. They're all the same in this case. And you can see all of these fields. These are all custom fields that I created. I clicked here on Add Custom Field. I created a checkbox field, a text field, an image field, and I gave a name to the field, right? This is actually the retail audit is some kind of report that my reps fill in. Let me show it to you actually on the iPad. That contains a few dozen of these custom fields that I created. So the rep has to come in here and fill in this form. Now, these are the field headings, and the field value is true or false. It's a checkbox, right? Or if it was a text field, it would say, you know, write your comments about this, this retail location, and then there would be a text box here for the value of the field. So I added a few dozen of these fields to create this audit form that I want my sales reps to fill in. Now, obviously, the heading of the field was in my default language. In this case, my default language is in English. I could technically come in here and say, oh, hey, I'm going to translate this title of the field to a different language, to French. But that means that any user that logs in will see it in French. And I don't want it to be hard-coded in French. I want it to rely on the language of the device that the user selected. So if the user changes their iPad to French, they'll see the French translation that I will upload in my own CSV files. If the user keeps their device in English, they'll see it in English. Okay, so I wanted to just highlight the difference between going here and hard-coding the title of the field and uploading multiple translations of that field title using the multilingual configuration in CSV files. Okay, I hope that was a clear explanation. If it wasn't understood, please ask questions. Okay, so that's an example of fields that I can translate. Of course, you can translate all of the basic fields like account name, phone number, email address, notes, order details, remarks, item description. All of those actual headings of all of the Pepperi fields can also be translated, but typically it's these fields that really matter to people. They're custom fields that they want to make sure that they're translated. So now let's go back to the translation files. You understand a little bit more about what I'm actually translating, and say I added the option to have Spanish and French. Now what I actually have to do is say, okay, I'm going to check off the language I want to translate, and I'm going to export that file. That file contains kind of a very, it looks very complicated, but once you understand the format, it's a CSV file. And I wanted to stress here, it's very important to edit this file in Notepad, Notepad++. I'm sorry, to do the translation in Notepad++. Because there are encoding issues with special characters in languages, so it's very important to see here, I just opened a file in Notepad++, and the special characters in Spanish will look fine. Let me look for fields that have actually been translated. Okay, here's an example. You see this word on top of the U, there's an accent. Publico, there's an accent over the U. When you open this file in Excel, like many people open CSV files in Excel, the encoding somehow gets disrupted and the special characters don't come through and it looks like garbage. So very important to edit the file in Notepad++. You can check the encoding, save it in Notepad++, and then import it as data in Excel, and then it will preserve the encoding. It's just as easy, in my opinion, to translate it right here in Notepad++. Okay, download it for free, and that preserves the encoding. Okay, so now you're wondering, wow, what am I going to do with this huge file, this huge CSV file? I have to start sifting through data. Let's understand the structure of the file, okay? The first column has the control type name, the name of the field, which is the internal Pepperi name of the field. For example, let's look at a field that's easier to understand. Okay, let's look at, for example, the title of the column in the grid view. Okay, the control name, the kind of the key for this string in Pepperi is order center item grid view dot image. The next column in the CSV represents the profile that you're translating for. Now, to make things even more flexible, I don't know if you can understand now how flexible this tool actually is. Not only can you translate based on the device of the language, you can translate based on the profile on top of that. So if you have, say, a sales rep and a merchandiser, and they both have their devices in French, you can translate one translation of the field for the sales rep and another translation or explanation of the field for the merchandiser. Actually, it's not really a choice because there is no default like there was in the profiles. If you wanted to be translated for both of the profiles, you would have to duplicate this row. It would have to be translated for the rep, and then it would also have to be translated for the merchandiser. This is a situation where opening the file in Excel comes in handy because then you can just duplicate all the rows that you translated for the rep and then just change the name of the profile to merchandiser, and then you have it translated for the rep and the merchandiser. Okay, so you do need to translate for multiple profiles. So if you're using both profiles and you're also using multilingual, you'll have to do the translation for all the profiles that you need. And the last column is the actual value, the actual translation of the word image. So this is how you would translate, say, image into Spanish. Okay, so then you have the key, you have the profile, and then you have the value in that language. Okay, so I want to show you an example of what I've already translated. Here I have the custom fields that I created. You can see I have an activity form with all of these custom fields, and what I did is I pasted here the translation of the field from English. I translated it into Spanish. So for the custom fields, and those of you that are using custom fields already know that in Pepperi, the prefix for custom field is TSA. You have the name of the custom field. Okay, so if we look here in my Pepperi configuration of the form, of the retail audit, if we look at the list of fields that I created, remember I told you I created a few dozen custom fields here, right? I have all of these custom fields, and their field name is in English, right here. Signage is clearly visible. External building is clean. Aisles are clearly defined. Product is well lit. These field titles are all in English. When you exported the template, when I clicked on export to export this Spanish template, those fields were in English here. They were between these two quotes. There was the English text. I translated it to Spanish. Excuse my Spanish. I translated it using Google. So each time I pasted the Spanish translation here, and I made sure that I was translating it for the profile that uses that form, which is senior merchandiser, right? My rep doesn't use this form, so I don't need to duplicate these lines for the rep profile. The way the file works is it has the key, it has the profile, and it has the value. Any profile that you translate for, it will appear in Spanish if their device language is Spanish. If you don't translate it for the rep, it will appear in the default language, which is English. Here, what you'll see is now on the home screen, when I switched my iPad to Spanish, I translated the home screen button, and I translated the first few custom fields in that retail audit. This is the translation you saw in the file. So this is the power and the flexibility of being able to upload your own translations here under the configuration file, translation files. You need to import the file that you changed, and then it will be loaded into Pepperi. You might get some error because maybe you forgot a quotation mark or you had a duplicate line. It will tell you the error, go and fix it, and then import it again. Once you imported it, go to your device, change the language on your device to that language, and you can see those fields being shown for the profile that you logged in as. Make sure you're translating the fields for the relevant profile. Okay, one question, is the multilingual option part of the corporate plan? Actually, it's part of the ultimate plan, but like I said, same with the user profiles, it can be turned on for you for testing, and then you can talk to your sales rep and see if it can be added to your package. It's part of the ultimate plan, like the user profiles. If anyone has some kind of interesting use case that they need in their organization, I would be very happy to hear about it, because I'm always looking for interesting use cases to know how these features are being used. I mean, we know why they were developed for very specific use cases that are more popular than others. Like I said, you know, the user profiles are for the display to limit the functionality exposed to different roles. The multilingual is for the custom fields. Typically, most people use it. But if you have some other use cases, please email me and let me know. I can even think of ways, you know, maybe I can help you with the implementation. So if you think these features are beneficial for you and will increase your efficiency, will make the app more friendly to your reps, right? To see something in your own language, you can't compare that to having to read through something in English if that's not your native language. So it's really meant to make it more friendly for your reps, and they will love Pepperi even more. Okay? Thank you for everyone for taking the time to join, and we will update you on further product education activities that we have. I'll end the webinar, and thank you one last time. Bye-bye.